Yep.
Okay, we have, including today, we have 2 weeks left in this series. We've been doing this together since January. So it's been a lot of fun. We've both had people request our notes. We've been working to kind of compile the entire thing together in a way that's presentable. So just to help us make sure everybody can get what they want, I'm going to pass this notebook around. If you'll just put name and email address, we'll get that out to anybody that wants that. I'm humbled and flattered that anybody would ask. So thank you. We started this class in January. We're approaching the end of April. We're almost done. We have looked at why God created, where we fit into creation at large ourselves. We've looked at Eden as God's original and continual desire for human relationship, and as the ideal towards which he has been working ever since. We've talked at length about bearing God's image and bringing his kingdom to earth today as it is in heaven. Over and over, we've outlined the cycle of God communing with humans, humans rejecting God, God withdraws, things go poorly for humanity, they cry out for help, and God returns and repeats. We took a few weeks to look at this cycle across all of Israel's history in the Old Testament narrative, and how Christ is the perfect manifestation once and for all of God with us. He is Emmanuel. To close out the series, we're going to bring God's story as it's presented in the Bible to its end. And there are going to be a lot of spoilers ahead because a lot of this hasn't happened yet. Fair warning. We're not going to do a deep dive into popular eschatological stances. What I mean by that is we're not going to look at end times prophecies and premillennialism and a lot of the Left Behind and all of that sort of thing. We're not going to do a verse by verse exegesis of Revelation or Daniel or anything like that. There's a lot of value in discussing those things, but it's beyond both the theme and the scope of this class. We are, however, going to look at 2 Old Testament prophecies and 2 New Testament passages by different authors and how they directly refer and are steeped in those 2 Old Testament places. I think that these are going to fit well together as kind of the final pieces of this narrative mosaic that we've been building together over the last 4 months. Originally, Israelite culture was ancient Near Eastern culture. I've mentioned that a couple times before. The ancient Babylonians, the ancient Egyptians, the Philistines, the Canaanites. This is all ancient Near East. In ancient Near Eastern thought, cultural destiny was closely bound to the land in which they lived. This clearly permeates Israelite thought from nearly the beginning. The land promise made to Abraham and the nation promise made to Abraham cannot be divorced from one another. This geographical identity hasn't been abandoned by post-Enlightenment modernity either. The idea of manifest destiny drove Western cultural expansion across the North American continent. Even in our generation, think about like 9/11. It was personal to each of us because it happened on our soil. Where we live is directly, it's a large part of our identity, our destiny. My thesis for these last 2 two class periods is this, that creation at large has shared and continues to share the same fate as the children of God, and that fate is physical resurrection and restoration. In the Bible, this idea is referred to as new creation, or as we'll see, it's also called the new heavens and the new earth. So we'll break all this down. To start off with, we're going to be in Romans chapter 8. We'll be there for a few minutes if you want to turn there. We're going to focus on verses 18 through 25, but I'm going to start reading verse 12 just to provide a little bit of context here. So then, brothers, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received the Spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided that we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. Not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, we groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for the adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. So let's pick some themes out of verses 12 through 17 that we've talked about before. By the Spirit, we are children of God. He is our Father. That's not a title. It's an intimate relationship. We also see here both Christ's glory and our glory. This entire passage here is set squarely within the narrative framework that we've laid so far, namely God's desire and plan for human relationship, for our hearts. This passage is steeped in Old Testament traditions. Beginning in verse 18, Paul explains that there is a glory that is coming to humanity. And along with this, creation will be glorified too. He actually personifies creation here. He gives it human attributes to exemplify both its glory and its curse. Creation waits for the revealing of the sons of God. It was unwillingly subjected to futility. It groans in childbirth. We see similar personification of creation in Psalms 19, 65, Jeremiah 4 and 12, Isaiah 24. This isn't something that he's just come up with as a literary device. In this passage, notice the nature of creation's curse. It is subject to the futile labor of man. It groans in the pain of bearing children. These are the very curses laid upon man and woman all the way back in Eden. Paul here openly connects the condition of creation to the condition of humanity. And if this connection isn't enough, we can just go back to Genesis 3 itself. In verse 17, God explicitly says to Adam, "Cursed is the ground because of you." And we ourselves groan with creation. We read that in verse 23. We weren't created for sin. Our physical bodies will be redeemed out of this curse. We can look at Romans 8, verse 11, right before where we started reading here. If the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ Jesus from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through his spirit who dwells in you. We can flip over to chapter 6, verses 4 and 5. We were buried, therefore, with him by baptism into death, in order that, just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too might walk in newness of life. Verse 5, for if we have been united with him in a death like his, we shall certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his. We, the glorified sons of God, share in the exact same resurrection as Jesus Christ. His physical body left the tomb on the third day. He bore the scars. He walked again on water. He ate food. It was the exact same body restored. Ours will be too. The bondage of corruption that Paul mentions here in verse 21. It's the same language he uses over in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 to talk about bodily resurrection. He mentions it in verses 42 and in 50. I'm going to read here 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 53 and 54. He uses the word perishable and imperishable here. In the Greek, the same word as corruption. 1 Corinthians 15, 53 and 54. For this perishable body must put on the imperishable, and this mortal body must put on immortality. When the perishable puts on the imperishable and the mortal puts on immortality, then shall come to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? Our glorified physical bodies will be restored, and with them creation will be restored as their glorified physical environment. The Old Testament passage that Paul quotes in 1 Corinthians 15 here, death is swallowed up in victory, it's found in Isaiah 25. Chapters 24 through 27 of Isaiah really appear to have provided much of the framework that shapes his eschatology, his ideas of what is coming. Because not only does he quote it directly here in 1 Corinthians 15, but Romans 8 that we just read, it's essentially a summary of these 4 chapters. It reads just like you read on the back of a book. I'm gonna go through these 4 chapters together, and we'll break down this narrative and show how this has been God's plan for forever. I'm gonna start reading Isaiah 24. I've got a big chunk here. It's the first 13 verses. So this is Isaiah 24, verses 1 through 13. Behold, the Lord will empty the earth and make it desolate, and he will twist its surface and scatter its inhabitants. And it shall be as with the people, so with the priest, as with the slave, so with his master, as with the maid, so with her mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller, as with the lender, so with the borrower, as with the creditor, so with the debtor. The earth shall be utterly empty and utterly plundered. For the Lord has spoken this word. The earth mourns and withers. The world languishes and withers. The heavens languish with the earth. The earth lies defiled under its inhabitants, for they have transgressed the laws, violated the statutes, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore, a curse devours the earth, and its inhabitants suffer for their guilt. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are scorched, and few men are left. The wine mourns, the vine languishes, all the merry-hearted sigh. The mirth of the tambourines is stilled. The noise of the jubilant has ceased. The mirth of the lyre is stilled. No more do they drink wine with singing. Strong drink is bitter to those who drink it. The wasted city is broken down. Every house is shut up so that none can enter. There is an outcry in the streets for lack of wine. All joy has grown dark. The gladness of the earth is banished. Desolation is left in the city. The gates are battered into ruins. For thus it shall be in the midst of the earth, among the nations, as when an olive tree is beaten, as at the gleaning when the grape harvest is done. I know there's a lot there. These verses communicate sin's effect on the cosmos at large. The earth will be plundered. The earth mourns and withers. We see again that personification that we saw in Romans 8. Desolation is left in the city, and thus it shall be in the midst of the earth. Notice verses 5 and 6. The earth lies defiled, and it is devoured by a curse of human origin. And yet, God is praised in verses 14 and 15. They lift up their voices. They sing for joy. Over the majesty of the Lord, they shout from the west. Therefore, in the east, give glory to the Lord. In the coastlands of the sea, give glory to the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. Again, in verse 23, he reigns. Then the moon shall be confounded and the sun ashamed. For the Lord of hosts reigns on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and his glory will be before his elders. This continues in chapter 25. This is verses 1 through 9. I'll go quickly here. Oh, O Lord, you are my God. I will exalt you. I will praise your name. For you have done wonderful things, plans formed of old, faithful and sure. For you have made the city a heap, the fortified city a ruin. The foreigner's palace is a city no more. It will never be rebuilt. Therefore, strong peoples will glorify you. Cities of ruthless nations will fear you. For you have been a stronghold to the poor, a stronghold to the needy in his distress, a shelter from the storm and a shade from the heat. For the breath of the ruthless is like a storm against a wall. It's like heat in a dry place. You subdue the noise of the foreigners. As heat by the shade of a cloud, so the song of the ruthless is put down. On this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wine, of rich food full of marrow, of aged wine, well refined. And he will swallow up on this mountain the covering that is cast over all peoples, the veil that is spread over all nations. Here's the quote: he will swallow up death forever. And the Lord God will wipe away tears from all faces. And the reproach of his people he will take away from all the earth. For the Lord has spoken. It will be said on that day, behold, this is our God. We have waited for him that he might save us. This is the Lord. We have waited for him. Let us be glad and rejoice in his salvation.
Does this remind you of a book in the New Testament?
It reminds me of a lot of things in the New Testament.
It reminds me of Revelation.
Sure. Revelation is steeped in Old Testament imagery. We're actually going to just briefly discuss a little bit more here in a second. Yeah, absolutely. The Spirit through John was touching on all of this. It should come as no surprise.
There's a reference in Hebrews as well where he talks about he makes a contrast between Mount Sinai and Mount Zion. Right here, you mentioned a couple of times about this mountain, and in weeks past we've talked about the significance of the mountaintop and how the gods, right, in this culture in this time. But in Hebrews chapter 10, we've got this. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to the myriads of angels, to the general assembly and the church of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and so forth. So there's we've got these threads, as you say, that are connecting. And the New Testament writers, just as Paul in both the Roman and Corinthian letters, they're bringing all of this back from the prophecies and saying this is the revelation of all this stuff, right? And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, it's the conclusion. It's a restoration of Eden. God will once again dwell with us among creation. He'll walk with us. He's just seeking to restore that ideal.
Yeah. And if you can think back, you may or may not remember the actual title that we gave to this class in the beginning is called the Scheme of Redemption. And even going back to the Romans 8, where Brandon started, like in verse 21, the creation itself will also be set free, right? So you've got redemption kind of language there about the creation. And then in verse 23, we, humanity, are waiting eagerly for our adoption as sons, the redemption of our body. So there's this physical redemption that's actually going to be taking place and redeeming us out of the slavery, the corruption in which we now exist, back into the freedom of the garden environment. That's what the whole premise is about.
Yeah, we gotta keep moving. That's good. At the beginning of Isaiah 25, back in Isaiah 25, God's glory is manifest on earth in the first 5 verses. He has done wonderful things. He is a stronghold to the poor. He has laid desolate the enemy's city. Greatest of all, as Paul quoted in 1 Corinthians in verses 7 and 8, he will swallow the curse that covers all people, namely death itself. He will remove this curse from all the earth in verse 8. And this will be what his people have waited for in verse 9. This is the hope that Paul mentioned in Romans 8. More and more we see where he got his ideas. Let's continue on into chapter 26. A song of praise will be sung by God's faithful in the first 6 verses. The proud will be humbled. Sound familiar? The poor and the needy will tread on them. We see continued this theme of waiting and hoping on the Lord in verses 8, 9, and down in 16. I'm going to read 16 through 19 here. Listen for similar themes. O Lord, in distress they sought you. They poured out a whispered prayer when your discipline was upon them, like a pregnant woman who writhes and cries out in her pains when she is near to giving birth. So were we because of you, O Lord. We were pregnant, we writhed, but we have given birth to wind. We have accomplished no deliverance in the earth, and the inhabitants of the world have not fallen. Your dead shall live. Their bodies shall rise. You who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy. For your dew is a dew of light, and the earth will give birth to the dead. Again, this is couched thematically in the Eden narrative. In waiting for deliverance, God's people cry out in pregnancy pains. They accomplish nothing in their futility on earth. And again, God will restore life to their bodies down in verse 19. And with this, we move on to 27. Before we wrap this up with chapter 27, let's go back over quickly just a couple of points of the Eden narrative. God created out of the waters that were already there in Genesis 1:1. Adam and Eve ate the fruit at the suggestion of a serpent. In ancient Near Eastern stories, both bodies of water and serpents and dragons, they represent this idea of chaos. They represent that which in life is not ordered. And finally, this last theme to remember from Eden in Genesis 3, what was the curse that was pronounced upon the serpent by God? That's a question.
Crawl on his belly
And?
all of his life.
Yes. And what's the second half of that?
Help.
Pardon me?
Enmity.
Yeah, the head will be crushed. There will be enmity between the woman and the serpent, and the head will be crushed. So with these in mind, let's look at chapter 27. This is Isaiah 27, verse 1 and on. In that day, the day that this hope comes to pass, the Lord with his hard and great sword will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent. Leviathan, the twisting serpent. and he will slay the dragon that is in the sea. In that day, a pleasant vineyard. Sing of it. I, the Lord, am its keeper. Every moment I water it. Lest anyone punish it, I keep it day and night. I have no wrath. Would that I had thorns and briars to battle. I would march against them. I would burn them up together, or let them lay hold of my protection. Let them make peace with me. Let them make peace with me. In days to come, Jacob shall take root. Israel shall blossom and put forth shoots and fill the whole world with fruit. Once again, God declares that he will defeat the serpent enemy of his people. This reads very similarly to Revelation, the dragon and the woman.
And out of where did the dragon come in the Revelation? Came out of the sea.
Yep, out of the sea. This is a declaration of justice and order in God's new creation. He is faithful and he is mighty. And in that day, he will slay the dragon, our enemy, and in its place, he will plant a vineyard and he will keep it. He will protect it. He will have no wrath against it. Such will it be in his new creation, and Israel, his people, will fill the world with its fruit. He goes on later in this chapter to say that he'll tear down idols and altars and call to himself all of his who are spread out across the world. To close here, where else are we familiar with God as a vine dresser?
Say that again.
Yes, ma'am. Where else in the Bible are we familiar with God as a vine dresser or a keeper of a vineyard?
I am statements.
Jesus
Yeah.
made lots of analogies to it.
He did. The I am statement, he made several of those. There was one particularly in John chapter 15. I am the true vine.
Mm-hmm.
We've touched on this quite a bit in this class. I love this passage. This is John 15, 1 through 17. This is Jesus touching on this very same passage and theme and declaring himself the fulfillment of it. John 15, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine. You are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. Does this sound like Isaiah 27? If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers. And the branches are gathered and thrown into the fire and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish and it'll be done for you. By this, my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. Just as I have my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command you so that you will love one another. Jesus paints a very clear picture of what the new creation is like. It's rooted in him. It's full of his fruit. And we participate in that because that fruit is love for one another. Love that lays down its life for one another. And when we are in him, we fill the world with his fruit. And like we read in Isaiah 27, God protects us and cares for us. And one day this will be fulfilled perfectly. This is the very reason that we were created. This is it. This is it. Going all the way back to the very first lesson of this entire series. God is love. He created us to be loved and to love. And that is how it will be at the end of the age. It is the single constant theme throughout all of this, the theme out of which all else flows. This is heaven on earth. That's it. This is heaven on earth. This is the new creation. That's all I got for you. Any questions? Any comments? We got about 5 minutes left or so.
I have a comment as usual. I just think about what this world would be if we just followed 2 of Jesus's commands. One is love God, and the other one, love your brethren. Mm-hmm. And you just think, I mean, that doesn't sound like a hard thing, does it? Some of us, I guess, are more hard to love than others. I often think about what this world would be like, and it seems like our world is fast going in the other direction all over the world. And it just seems like it'd be such an easy thing.
It does. And, I think that's where our personal agency comes in is I wish everybody lived that way. But I can't control everybody. I can control me, kind of. And so I try to live that way. And by living that way, I just create a little slice of heaven on earth wherever I go, or try to, at least.
One of the, I used to do like a lot of business coaching, things like that. So I would read a lot of personal development books. And one of the guys that I watched and read and listened to a lot was a guy named Jim Rohn. Is anybody familiar with Jim Rohn? R-O-H-N. One of the statements that he made that had a big impact on me is, don't wish things were different. wish you were better. And that puts the onus on us, right? The personal agency, as you said. And because we can't change the condition of the world, but we can change ourselves and the way that we interact with the world around us. So we can wish upon a star, right, that things were different, but things aren't going to be different until the Lord comes. But what we can wish and what we can work towards and pray about and diligently pursue is that the Spirit will continue his transforming work within us so that we will become more and more like Jesus every day and abide in his love, right? That's our responsibility. That's exactly our call, is to be a productive branch of the vine that is love. And if we are a productive branch of the vine that is love, that productivity results in the fruit of love. That's our responsibility.
If we do that, we're just thinking about ourselves, right?
No,
And if we think about the world out there, it's not a hard thing to do, to tell people, I really love you. And I told that to a lady yesterday.
yeah,
She's not a member of the church. And she tears up. And she says, thank you. I love you too.
yeah.
But we can't just show them. We've got to tell them. Sue knows how I feel about her. She gives good hugs.
Right. But that's, so I think to your point though, that you had said that it's about us or something like that, but I would say that the opposite is true, because if it's genuine love, just like you exhibited yesterday, right? You shared your love with her. That made it about her.
Yeah.
It made it about God, because you shared the love of God with her, regardless of who she was, what she had been through, what she had been doing, how she may have treated you or anybody else that day. You exhibited the love of God in making that simple 3-word statement, I love you. And sometimes it's not always about the words, sometimes it's about the actions, right? It involves both. It's not one or the other. It's not a either or, it's a both and, right? So yeah, we speak the words and we live the life, demonstrate by action, both of them. But I wish there were more. I wish I was better at that. I wish there were more of us just expressing that to the people around us. Hey, I just want you to know I love you. And just like that lady teared up, who knows when the last time she had heard anybody say that to her? Never know how long it had been since she had heard those words.
When I think of love, I think of my husband. And the nursing home one day, I went in and I said, John Nickens, do you know how much I love you? He said, I love you too. He said, but I love Gail too. For those of you that don't know, Gail's my sister. It was a good thing I wasn't a jealous woman. Just put a knot on your head.
Well, that's a great thing about love. It goes and goes and goes and goes.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ren.